Before we dive into things tonight, we wanted to just reintroduce ourselves and also look back to one of the actions that we asked you to take in September, which was to send in comments to the Election Assistance Commission, a commission that was created by the Help America Vote Act, a commission that is independent, a commission that has an equal number of Republicans and Democrats on it, a commission whose commissioners are appointed by the president but approved by the Senate, and a commission which had a petition brought by the America First legal organization. And this is that right-wing organization that brings a lot of challenges around the operations of the federal government. And what they did is they petitioned the Election Assistance Commission to impose a nationwide proof of citizenship requirement for voter registration. And we know that that could stop as many as 21 million Americans from registering to vote. And when we say proof of citizenship, we're talking about documents, specifically show a passport, show a birth certificate where your name matches, that is in order, in other words, not expired. Well, this kind of show your papers policy, we believe, has no place in our democracy. And so we asked you all to go out and take action by making comments and saying to the Election Assistance Commission, no way, no how. This is premised on the myth of immigrants without status who are not authorized to vote voting. And we know that's a big fat whopper. That's not happening. In fact, it's statistically so rare that it's often described as vanishingly rare. And yet, it's been ginned up in order to put in place restrictions that would particularly harm people of color, poor people, older people who may not have a birth certificate, right? And also, interestingly enough, married women who had changed their name. This kind of approach is sort of equal opportunity voter suppression in some ways, maybe not quite, but it actually affects Republicans and Democrats alike in many states across the country. And so we said, go in and let the Election Assistance Commission know, no way, no how, this is not good for American democracy. And guess what, friends? We submitted, together with our compatriots at the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Brennan Center and a few other organizations, we submitted over 150,000 comments. And that's with the Amazon cloud business and going down, the portal went down and everything. 150,000 comments. That's a lot of comments. You know, you don't usually get that many comments on the work of a commission, but we got them in, friends, and I want to just thank you. We're going to see where it goes from here. We will keep you posted. But remember, sometimes we focus a bit on legislation, but remember there are other ways to make your voice heard and that you're needed to be heard. And writing these comments in to the Election Assistance Commission was one of them. So let me stop and say, hey, I'm Noelle D'Amico, Director of Social Justice at the Worker Circle. We're a Jewish social justice organization with more than 200,000 activists across the country. And we love doing effective advocate together with our dear friends and partners at the Center for Common Ground. So I'm going to turn it back to Andrea.
Thank you, Noelle. Thank you so very much for that update. Next slide, please. Let's start moving through this deck. What we will be talking about tonight, we already did the update on the Elections Assistance Commission proof of citizenship requirement. I'm going to be talking about the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and walking you through the relevant sections so you will definitely understand the stepped up, revved up attack that we are seeing on voting rights. So we're seeing it through the Elections Assistance Commission. We've already seen it through Congress, and now the courts are potentially going to act again. We'll be talking about influencing public opinion and then upcoming actions. Next slide. Now, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 had three very, very powerful sections. And a lot of people have heard the section numbers, but they don't necessarily understand what they do. So, Section 5, back in 2013, that was the area of the Voting Rights Act that we thought they were going to attack. Section 5 requires states and political subdivisions, otherwise known as counties, that had a history of discrimination to obtain federal approval before they could make changes to their voting laws. So back in 2013, that was where we expected the attack to come. Section 4 contains the formula that determines which states and counties are going to be subject to the additional scrutiny under Section 5. And then there was Section 2 itself, which prohibits any voting practice or voting procedure where it is discriminating based on race, color, membership in a language minority group, and it required equal voting rights and access for all citizens. Next slide. Now, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 has been continually and literally almost automatically reauthorized. When it was originally introduced, it was set to expire after 10 years. It was again reauthorized in 1982, and Congress, when they are requiring that a bill be reauthorized, they can set the time period. That's why we've got it expires in 10 years, it needs to be reauthorized in 7, it needs to be reauthorized in 15. And then finally, in 2006, it was authorized for 25 years. This Voting Rights Act has been reauthorized by Republican presidents Ford, Reagan, Bush, and Baby Bush. And there has never been a problem. As a matter of fact, in 1982, they expanded it to require that language assistance and language support be included in the Voting Rights Act. Next slide. Now, in 2013, we saw Shelby v. Holder, and the holder was Attorney General Eric Holder. We originally, as I said, expected that they were going to go after Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and it was going to be a direct attack on preclearance. Instead, it was a direct attack on the formula that determined what states and what counties would be subject to preclearance, not the preclearance itself. In a 5-4 vote, they said that this part of the act was unconstitutional because the formula was based on what was going on 40 years ago. And as we know, America elected a Black president, so there was no longer a problem with racial discrimination. Next slide. Now, the Voting Rights Act, as we saw immediately after Shelby v. Holder, was that it was as important in 2012 as it was in 1965. In 2013, this is when we began to see voter ID and photo ID requirements appearing in state laws saying you must have a photo ID in order to vote. And I will never forget in Alabama when that photo ID law came down in Alabama, they immediately shuttered every DMV in the Alabama Black Belt. Next slide. Noel, I'm going to pass it over to you.
You bet. Thanks, Andrea. So, Andrea's been talking about the Shelby decision, which had to do with the formula for pre-clearance. And that's how you prevent laws that would be discriminatory before they get into practice. So, it was designed to be preventative and to stop it. But what happens if people still experience discrimination? Well, you have to be able to sue after the fact. And that's where Article 2 comes in. So in Brnovich v. DNC, which was decided by the Supreme Court in July of 2021, the Worker Circle was proud to submit an amicus brief together with the Leadership Conference. It had to do with laws that in Arizona that had said if you cast your ballot out of a precinct, we're not going to count it. And there was another law that said no longer can people in a community collect ballots that are, they're sealed ballots that are early ballots, and you bring them in and return an early ballot for someone. They said no, only if you are a family member or a direct caregiver. And so this made its way up to the Supreme Court. And sadly, the Supreme Court made the decision to uphold these discriminatory Arizona laws. Should a ballot be cast out of precinct and counted? No. Ballots were then to be discarded, even for those races for governor or president where it's allowable in the state to cast outside your precinct. And they made it very restrictive. Only a caregiver or a family member may return an early ballot. Well, if you just think for a minute, might have difficulty returning their ballot? Well, people who live far away from postal service, people who are in care facilities, people who will find it difficult to either have the time or in some ways the ability to get to where the early voting drops are. And so there had been various groups and, there have been churches that did it. There had been organizations that did it that went around and made sure that everybody's early vote ballot made it to the drop box, but no more. And so this has had a disproportionate impact, and we knew it would, on voters of color, on poor voters, on Native American voters as well. And so the Workers' Circle was part of the amicus with the Leadership Conference, but the court decided in favor of Arizona. And that really sets us up now. You've seen Article 4 decimated the formula to prevent harm. Now you start weakening, undermining Article 2. And that starts to bring us up to the next big challenge before the court, Allen v. Milligan.
Look, Alan V. Milligan was in Alabama because Alabama was looking at the makeup of the population. And they were looking at, wait a minute, when we look at our state and we break it down by race, there are enough Black voters, roughly 800,000, when technically there should have been two majority minority districts. And utilizing Allen v. Milligan, that produced the Alabama Second Congressional District. And in 2024, Alabama elected Shamari Figures, who is currently in Congress today. Now, it was very, very interesting for us at Center for Common Ground in 2024 because we worked in two Black Belt districts. North Carolina 1, where Don Davis won re-election, and Alabama Congressional District 2, where Shamari Figures won in that brand new seat. So coming up next, we have E.C. Rents, who is our Alabama Democracy Center co-leader, who really worked to build the coalition that really managed to turn out the Black vote in the Black Belt of Alabama and get Shamari Figures elected. So welcome, EC.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I'm E.C. Rents with the Alabama Democracy Centers. Alabama is fortunate to have a network of democracy centers consisting of Huntsville, Selma, and Mobile. And our Mobile Center is actually located in that new congressional second district. What happened there was after it went through the Supreme Court over a 2-year period, the Supreme Court finally decided to allow it to pass. So our district court had 3 different maps that it was looking at as far as that new congressional district. So they actually chose that 3rd map. Now, the interesting part about that 3rd map was that the majority percentage was only 48%. And the reason for that is because in the state of Alabama, when you do redistricting, you can only divide a county, 2 counties, you can only split them. So in order to get that number, they were only allowed to split 2 counties, Washington and Clark County, which made it difficult, thinking that generally a majority is over 50%. But what we were able to do, we began work immediately after the decision was made that allowed the establishment of that new second congressional district. And we realized that this was going to take a effort of not just 1, 2, or 3 organizations, but we were fortunate enough to gather over 24 organizations, and let me state grassroots organizations over the state of Alabama that made a commitment to work to get that information out across that new developed second congressional district. Now, we use that terminology from the very, very beginning. We are nonpartisan, but we're also non-stupid. So we wanted to make sure that the constituents of the second congressional district understood that it was important for them to make their interests known to the candidates. So we actually began working on that district prior to even knowing who the candidates would be. The Democratic Party had about 13 candidates, the Republican Party had about 9, and even the Libertarian Party had about 2 candidates running. So we began working to get the information out to the area about their new congressional districts, but not just getting them to know about it, getting them to understand that it was important for them to express their concerns, especially when it came to policies and platforms that they would be interested in. So we at the Center for Common Ground and Alabama Democracy Centers started at the first primary elections in March, and we were able to disseminate over 95,000 text messages in that congressional district, but primarily to the 2 urban areas, which was Montgomery and Mobile. We saw a turnout, a low turnout from what our standpoints are, of about half that amount, but an equal amount in both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So we knew we had a lot of work to do. So what we did was we made sure that constituents in all of those 13 counties got their opinions and their policies across, so the candidates would know what their interests were and what their concerns were. We made sure that both of the candidates was presented that information. Fortunately, the progressive candidate or the Democratic candidate took it and made it a part of their policies. What that did was that after a primary, after the runoff, and when 2 candidates were decided from each of the parties, I'm sorry, one candidate from each of the parties was actually decided upon, the race was on. We, again, being nonpartisan, made sure that the constituents of that district was well aware of what each candidate was offering. Of course, one candidate was speaking primarily on the individual who at that time was running for president, and then the other one was speaking primarily on what the needs of the communities would be. Well, after the election was held, it was a tough election. And up until probably about 12 o'clock, it was up in the air on November 5th, the election night. And I'll never forget texting back and forth with Andrea. It looked dim at one point because one of the candidates was leading by, well, had a majority of 55%. But what was exciting was just the mere fact that one of the major metropolitan area and counties, Montgomery counties, hadn't reported. And once they reported, we saw a win with Shamari Figures being elected, only the second Black United States Congressman in the history of Alabama being elected with 54% of the votes. Now, what that showed us at that particular time was that it was very important for folks to understand the importance and the power that they have if they participate. And the reason why we said that and we emphasize that in the 2nd Congressional District is across the state of Alabama, there were over 500,000 registered Black voters who did not vote in 2024. But we were able to see that win in that 2nd Congressional District. In addition to Shamari Figures being elected as a United States Congressman, we also saw in that district a win for Vice President Kamala Harris. So we knew that if we put forth the effort to get folks to understand not just the importance, but the power that they have, that we could see some victories in the state of Alabama, which is considered a red state. But we know overall that there's no such thing as a red state, especially not in Alabama. there's a non-voting state. So this is where our interest is at this particular time. We have a goal of working to increase voter participation across the state. Now looking to retain that vote in the second congressional district along with the seventh congressional district, but expanding also to the third and the fifth. And we realize that if we're able to get the vote out by using these 24 non-partisan but grassroots organization, that we can see some success in Alabama. But that also gives us a blueprint of how we can work not only in Alabama, but all of the southern states, because the majority of the southern states are largely has large contingencies of black votes. So we're working to get that vote out. And one of the things that we're noticing now that's become an important part is with all of the negativity that we're seeing in the current administration, Alabama is considered the third largest state with federal employees. And a lot of those employees are being devastated right now with the government shutdown. And not only that, we're also seeing that families of lower income are being affected with all of the negativity coming out as far as Medicaid, and also the SNAP program. So this gives us interest. However, it's very difficult because of the low amount of financial support that we're able to receive at this particular juncture. So that's just a quick overview of where we are, but also just the knowledge of knowing that if efforts are put forward and if everyone is working on the same page and not working in silos, we can accomplish great things. Alabama has been on the back burner of what's been able to be accomplished, but this was phenomenal, not just for the state of Alabama, but for the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very, very much, EC. So, Louisiana versus LA, basically what that is we already know that Alabama was successful when they challenged using Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to get that second congressional district. Next slide. Now, there were a group calling themselves non-African American voters. After our success in 2023 of getting that new district, and then the 24 election of getting not only a second Black member of Congress, but a second Democrat, this group, non-African American voters, filed a suit claiming the new districts were racially gerrymandered and violated the 4th and 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. So there was Louisiana versus LA, and the NAACP basically countered that suit, Robinson v. LA. And then the Supreme Court combined the two suits, and we basically have Louisiana versus LA, which is how it is currently listed in the court. Now, what will that do? Next slide. So, what this means when we look at southern states and some northern states is we are now seeing this call for redistricting literally halfway between the census redistricting. And again, this is like turning the Voting Rights Act on its head and saying, oh, white voters are being discriminated against, so we're going to need to end the racial gerrymandering. Why do they want to end the racial gerrymandering? Because they are trying to pick up more seats in Congress. Now, when we look at gerrymandering, we normally look at one of two things: packing, where they take all the black voters and pack them into a single district. That is what they did in Virginia in the 1990s when Bobby Scott ran for Congress in Virginia. What they want to do now is they want to correct districts that are majority minority districts, or and that may be democratic districts as well, to, in their mind, make them more competitive and non-racially gerrymandered. If you have spent any time traveling through the United States, you know that we are more segregated in 2025 than we were in the 1970s and the 1980s. A lot of that is economic. New slide, or next slide. The following states are thinking about redrawing their district lines. Now, the first state that jumped into the fray was Texas. And Texas believes that by redrawing their lines, they can come up with 5 additional Republican districts. Well, the only problem with that is the area where they're considering redistricting has a very high Hispanic population. And what we are hearing from Hispanic voters is they are not pleased with the way the conservative Republicans have handled immigration. Of course, Florida, not about to be outdone by Texas, wants to redistrict. And then Governor Gavin Newsom put Proposition 50 on the ballot in California, where they said if Texas redraws their lines, then California will redraw their lines. And these new redrawn maps will remain in effect until 2030, when we will bring back an independent redistrict commission and we will work to fix the lines and make the maps fairer again. Missouri is going after Representative Emanuel Cleaver's seat. There is really only one Democratic congressional district in Missouri, and they are looking at correcting that district. Louisiana, like Alabama, created a second majority minority district, and they are looking at breaking up that district. Illinois and New York and Maryland, in response, said, well, if everybody else is going to redistrict, we can adjust our maps as well. Now, Maryland has one Republican district, and that's Andy Harris. But again, if Maryland were to redraw her maps, there is a very good probability that Maryland would have 0 Republican districts, because since Maryland is on the other side of DC, they are home to a number of federal workers. This has impacted property values and a lot of other things, and it has produced major unhappy voters. Utah is talking about redistricting. Not sure why. They have no Democratic reps, but they must be thinking about something, along with Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Next slide.
But one thing I want, because the next thing is some actions. One thing I wanted to show about Louisiana versus Calais is what the South in particular would look like if Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was basically decimated because making it a racial gerrymandering basically legal. And I just wanted to show folks, hang on, this visual because it's really shocking what it would do. But of course, the New York Times doesn't want to work at the moment for me. Um, okay,
The
hopefully
link
this will
in the
work.
chat, I've got a New York
Here
Times
we are.
subscription. There you go. Yes. Okay.
So currently this is just in the South, but it includes, look, see, Alabama right now, CD2 is that one new district that folks won in 2023 because of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. If Louisiana versus Calais turns out the way we assume it will, and the Supreme Court basically says we don't need Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, Alabama is going to lose both of its majority-minority districts. So this is what is at risk right now in the Supreme Court. They started oral arguments for this last week, and it could have severe impacts on what our elections will look like in the midterms and beyond. This coupled with now states doing all this random redistricting is going to make it really unpredictable to know who's actually really going to be represented in Congress. So I just wanted to share this visual, and I'll make sure to put the link in the chat as well.
And leave the visual up for a moment, Josie. When you look at these maps, you can basically see where the black belts are in the southern state. What's the black belt? Well, every southern state has a black belt. That is where the land was incredibly rich, and that is also where all the plantations were. Where there were plantations, there were slaves. Now, in after the Civil War, when the slaves were finally freed, not everybody went north. There were a lot of people who decided, I'm going to stay right where I am because the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't know. So when you look at these blue spots on the map on the left, that's where the majority of the plantations were. And so after the Voting Rights Act, when Black people were able to register and vote, you saw certain Southern districts turn blue, and in many instances, elect a Black member of Congress. All right, now, next slide. And then Josie, I think that'll be you because now we're talking about actions.
Yes. So finding out, knowing ways to kind of fight the Supreme Court itself can feel really inaccessible or difficult, but there are actions that you can take. It doesn't have to be rallying outside of the Supreme Court. It can also be advocating Congress to pass the right bills. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is a super critical bill. We've talked about this in past effective advocates because it would restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to what it was. It would make sure that states with a history of discriminatory voting rights acts, voting bills, sorry, would have to get approval from Congress before they pass any laws. So it would reestablish preclearance, and it would protect a lot of states from this racial gerrymandering and discriminatory voting that's being passed or has been passed for the last few years. So we'll put that link in the chat and also send it in the follow-up email so that you can contact your members of Congress. Now, I know this might not feel like it's going to be incredibly effective, but I would like to remind you that The SAVE Act was, we thought, really going to pass through Congress, but it effectively died in Congress because of all the pushback and advocacy done by folks like you on the call today. So talking to your elected officials really does matter because they need to know we are still paying attention to them. We know what matters and what's important for preserving our democracy, and we want them to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to protect our freedom to vote. Another thing you can do is if you're living in a state where gerrymandering or redistricting is taking place, for example, folks in California with Prop, is it 50, 51? There's a lot you can do to just get involved with local initiatives and actions in favor or against redistricting. You can pay attention to that and get involved with local groups. So I'll make sure to try to find some resources that I can share in the follow-up email as well about that.
All right, great. Great. Next slide. Yes, phone bank with us in Virginia. Virginia has a very important election coming up on November 4th. On November 4th, Virginia will elect a new governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and all 100 seats of the Virginia General Assembly are up for election. So I am dropping the phone bank training link. Okay. In the chat. So you can go to Mobilize and, okay. Yeah, that's all right. And then you can do join a phone bank event. So we have counties where these are counties that we believe if we get enough voters out to vote, we will be very successful in flipping those seats. Right now, Virginia is 51 Dems, 49 Republicans in the Virginia House. Now, we have done a phenomenal job of early voting in Virginia. So far, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat, you will be able to check where early voting is in Virginia. It's updated every day. So far, 753,355 people have early voted in Virginia. That is roughly 275,000 more people than who voted in 2021. So join us for our National Guided Phone Banks. On Monday, you'll be with the Workers' Circle. On Tuesday and Thursday, you'll be with Center for Common Ground. These are nonpartisan phone banks. And now the Workers' Circle, they use PDI, Center for Common Ground. We're using the Active Power Dialer. Our phone banks are different because since we are giving voters information about where to vote, when it's open, and any other questions they may have about voting, we are giving information. So we leave messages. Next slide. Now, our phone banks have been very successful increasing turnout. Our phone banks are designed for individual counties because each county has its own phone number for its registrar, its own locations for early voting. We take the time to look all that information up and build it into our scripts. Now, our phone banks, what we have found is that if all the voter gets from us is a voicemail, we see a 5.9% increase in turnout. If you are lucky enough to talk to a voter, then we see turnout jump 17.3%. Next slide. We've got some upcoming events. Now, on October 30th, I will be doing a last update on the Virginia election before we have the actual election day vote on November 4th. There will be information and an activity on Disappeared in America weekend of action, November 1st and 2nd. And you can sign up at disappearedinamerica.us. And then I will be holding a Virginia election debrief on Thursday, November 6th at 8 p.m. So we will look at where are we in Virginia. Those of us who are here in Virginia, we are looking to add between 9 and 13 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates. There are no Virginia state Senate races, only the House of Delegates. Next slide. I think this may be the end. Yes, it is the end. All right. Are there questions? You can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand.
Andrea, while you're waiting for questions, let me just add the importance of these tools as far as getting people to understand the importance. For most of the folks that we're contacting, they have never ever received any type of communication. And once they receive this information, either through postcarding, phone banking, texting, or even canvassing, either by one or more of them, they understand that they play an important part also. So this is very helpful as far as getting the votes out, especially when the constituents who are generally considered marginalized don't necessarily put in places that they can participate. Thanks.
You, EC, for that, because one of the things that we try to explain to people is the work that we do on turning out the Black vote is really critical because candidates don't do it and the party doesn't do it. And so we come in and do the work that no one else does. And the folks in Alabama have done an amazing job. There are no districts in Alabama that are ever listed as target districts by the DNC. Alabama as a state is basically always ignored. Now, I just happened to catch a question at the very end of the chat. Do phone banks only do voicemail or do they sometimes get live phone calls? Well, our system looks for either a voicemail machine or someone to pick up the phone. So periodically, you do get people who pick up the phone. Most of the time, you will be leaving voicemail messages. Now, in 2021, the Georgia NAACP did a survey of 5,000 voters in Atlanta who did not vote in the 2020 election, nor did they vote in the runoff. The number one reason that people gave for not voting was they didn't know where to vote. So we really work hard to make sure there is no voter where at the end of the day, if they don't vote, that was their reason. They didn't know where to go. In Virginia, we have already written and sent 1,000 postcards to 858,000 registered Black voters. So I was so thrilled with those numbers. Absolutely thrilled. And I'm still looking for questions. John, Josie, are you seeing anything that I missed?
No,
No, I haven't seen
Nothing
anything
today.
else.
yeah.
All right. All right. Then we did a good job, and we are literally right on time. I hope to see a number of you or all of you on October 30th, and then also for the Virginia debrief. As I said, since I have known Abigail since she was Abby, um, for the first time, I have been elected or invited to be in the hotel while the campaign and the statewide candidates are waiting for the results to come in. Oh, and then we got a really great how can I help in Alabama? So, EC, is there anything that you need right now? Otherwise, Suzanne or anybody, if you want to help in Alabama, in 20, in Alabama, Virginia, or anywhere, you can email me, Andrea at centerforcommonground.org. And then you can tell me where you want to help because Georgia's got municipal elections. Alabama has municipal, everybody's got municipal elections. And in Virginia, we've just got elections coming up to us too. So you can email me and then I will get you hooked up with whoever can get you directly involved. Now, East E in Alabama, are you guys texting? What are you doing?
Oh, actually, Andrea, we just got finished a big text effort for our municipal elections across the state, and we saw positive results from them here in North Alabama. We saw only the first African American elected for city council in the neighboring city of Huntsville, in a small community in middle Alabama, Lynette, Alabama. We saw the election of a black mayor, black city council, and also black school board member. That was very positive. And then down in the Mobile area, we saw the election. We weren't successful in electing a mayor that was a constituent of the community in Mobile. However, in Pritchett, the neighboring city, we saw both a black mayor, black city councilman. In Mobile, however, we did see the election of a black city councilman. So those elections have taken place, and now we're getting ready in the state of Alabama in 2026. We'll be electing a new governor, a new United States senator, along with the 7 congressional districts. So those are very vital elections that are coming up in Alabama, and whatever support, assistance we can get would be greatly appreciated because this is going to be a outright fight in all of these elections. Thank you, Andrew.
Right. Thank you, EC. Thank you very, very much. And I am again going to thank all of you for joining us tonight. We know there's many different things that you can do. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and the weekend. So we hope to hear you on the phones in Virginia. We've got a National Guided Phone Bank coming up tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. So that would be great. Yes. All right.